Pablo Escobar. You've heard the name, right? To some, he was a hero. To others, an absolute monster. We're talking about one of the wealthiest criminals in history, but his story is so much more than just the money. It's a story of brutal power, really calculated generosity, and a legacy that Colombia is still, to this day, grappling with. So let's try to unpack the man behind the myth. And that's really the big question we're tackling here. How on earth did a man responsible for just unspeakable violence become an idol to the very people he terrorized? To understand the myth, you first have to understand the man and the country that he held in his grip. And this was his philosophy, as simple as it was terrifying. Plata o plomo. It means silver or lead. Accept my bribe or face my bullet. And make no mistake, this wasn't just some empty threat. It was the entire foundation of an empire that brought a nation to its knees. It was the choice he gave to judges, politicians, police officers, basically anyone who dared to stand in his way. So to really get a handle on who he was, you have to look at two completely opposite stories that are told about him. This is what we call the Escobar paradox, this total clash between the man people wanted to believe in and the man he actually was. On one side, you've got this image of a local savior, right? A champion of the poor in his hometown of Medellin. But on the other side, the global view is of a cold-blooded narco terrorist who literally waged a war against his own country. How can both of these things be true? Well, let's start with the myth. The myths of Pablo Escobar, the story people wanted to believe, is that of a modern-day Robin Hood. You know, a guy from a humble background who rises up, makes an unimaginable fortune, and then shares it with the people who have nothing. It's a powerful and, honestly, a pretty seductive story. I mean, just try to wrap your head around the sheer scale of his wealth. At his peak, his fortune was estimated at $5 billion. A number so huge it feels like something out of a movie. And this wealth, it was the engine for everything, both his violence and his so-called generosity. And this is how he spent some of that cash. He launched projects like Medellin without slums, building an entire neighborhood for people who had been living, literally, in a garbage dump. He gave them homes, soccer fields, a sense of dignity. And in doing so, he wasn't just building houses, he was building an army of loyal followers. And that loyalty? Oh, it was absolutely real. To this day, if you go to the neighborhood that still has his name on it, you'll hear people say things just like this. We love him for the social work he did with us. To them, he wasn't a criminal. He was the only powerful person who ever seemed to give a damn about them. Okay, so that's the myth. But now we have to turn the coin over and look at the brutal reality. Because every single dollar he gave away was stained with blood. The love he got was, as one person put it, completely conditioned by fear. So here's the catch. The really twisted part. His charity was a recruitment tool. The same poor communities he showered with gifts, they became the hunting grounds for his foot soldiers. He gave with one hand and put a gun in the other. These were his sicarios, young, often desperate men and boys from the slums, who saw working for Pablo Escobar as their only ticket out of poverty. They became this loyal and frankly disposable army that carried out bombings and assassinations for cash. When you put it side by side like this, it becomes so clear. The social projects were really all about social control. Building homes wasn't about charity. It was about gaining loyalty. Handing out cash wasn't about generosity. It was about creating a human shield of supporters that made it almost impossible for the police to move against him. It was a brilliant and totally sinister strategy. You know, for Escobar, being a criminal kingpin just wasn't enough. His ambition was huge. He wanted more than money. He wanted respectability. He wanted political power. And that ambition would lead him to declare war on the entire nation of Colombia. This timeline, it just shows you how fast things escalated. By 1982, he's not just a drug lord, he's a congressman. His move into politics is what many people point to as the beginning of the end for him. He craved that legitimacy, and it put him on a direct collision course with the state. And this was the moment everything changed. The justice minister, a man named Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, bravely stood up in public and exposed him, showing everyone where his money really came from. Escobar's response? Swift, public, and brutal. He had Lara Bonilla murdered on a street in Bogotá. This was a direct attack on Colombia's democracy, and the government declared all-out war. What followed was a campaign of narco terrorism that was just unlike anything the world had ever seen.
He assassinated a leading presidential candidate, Luis Carlos Galán. He detonated a massive truck bomb outside the headquarters of Colombia's security agency. And then, in his most infamous act, he targeted a civilian airplane.
107. That's the number of people who were on board Avianca Flight 203. 107 innocent people, men, women, children, killed in an instant when a bomb planted by Escobar's sicarios ripped the plane apart just minutes after takeoff. A number is just a statistic, right? Until you hear a story like this. This is from the son of one of the victims. For him, and for thousands of others, Pablo Escobar isn't some cool character in a TV show. He's the man who destroyed their families. And even when he was finally cornered, Escobar was still the one in control. He surrendered to the government, but completely on his own terms. He was imprisoned in this lavish, custom-built jail he called the Cathedral. It had a soccer field, private suites, you name it. And from inside, he kept running his empire, even ordering murders within the prison walls.
Escobar was eventually hunted down and killed in 1993, but his death didn't end his story, not by a long shot. In some ways, it was just the beginning of this incredibly complex and painful legacy that continues to divide Colombia today. It's wild, but after he died, the myth of Escobar just exploded. There's this term for it now, the Pablo Escobar syndrome, which describes this global fascination with his story. It's everywhere, TV series, movies, t-shirts, even Narco tours in Medellin that retrace his bloody steps. He's become a brand. And this really gets to the heart of the problem today. On the one hand, you have the Narco story, which gets glamorized and sold to the world. And on the other, you have the story of his victims, which is often a very lonely fight for them. They're struggling to make sure their loved ones aren't just forgotten amidst this whole pop culture phenomenon. At the end of the day, while we focus on this one larger-than-life figure, the real story is about this number. An estimated 50,000 people were killed because of narco-terrorism in Colombia during that time. That is the devastating, staggering human cost behind the myth. And that leaves us with this final, kind of uncomfortable question. It's easy to get caught up in the story of a powerful outlaw. It makes for great TV. But when a figure like Pablo Escobar is turned into a commercial brand, who really pays the price for our fascination? It's a question that his victims and their families have to live with every single day.